Stoicism gives me the tools to be like, well, there's no use in thinking and obsessing about that because I can't control what's going to happen in the future. What's giving me more and more peace and more like authenticity when I do my work and when I write and when I do go to work on my craft is like that mental training.
Hey everyone, my guest today needs almost no introduction. Camila Cabello, multi-platinum musician, one of the biggest pop stars in the world, billions of streams across all the streaming platforms. You've heard her on the radio a million times. She's great, and you might not know that she is a fan of Stoic philosophy. I found this out when I got a message from someone on Instagram. They said, "How dare you not acknowledge what Camila Cabello said about you on Instagram?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And I looked, and Camila had posted a page from the Daily Stoic, and we ended up connecting, which was so cool. And we've become, I would like to say, friends. We shared some book recommendations and gone back and forth. And I said, "Hey, do you want to do the podcast?" Thinking that she probably has way, way better things to do, and I'm sure a million requests to be on a million platforms. But she said yes, which was awesome. And so we had a great conversation. I'm coming to you from Arizona, visiting some family. Unfortunately, couldn't be in person. We should thank Shawn Mendes, her boyfriend, for doing tech support. We had some tech issues, but here's my interview. And I think you will enjoy these philosophical perspectives from someone who has seen the world, who is literally Cinderella. She's playing Cinderella in a new Sony Pictures movie. Someone who's experiencing adversity and difficulty just like the rest of us. What do you do when your business is performing in front of large groups of people and traveling, and suddenly you can't do that anymore, and you might not be able to do that for 6 months to another year? What do you do when life forces you to reconsider what you want your lifestyle to look like, what you want your routines to look like, what you want your focus and priorities to look like? When Marcus Aurelius says no role is so well suited to philosophy as the one we're in right now, he meant that about his life as an emperor, but it also applies to being a pop star, being an actress, being a girl in her 20s, being a guy in his 30s, being a father, being single, being an artist, being an entrepreneur, being whatever you are. We can all apply philosophy. In fact, we should be applying this philosophy because it makes us better. As the Stoics say, nothing prevents us from operating always with courage, justice, moderation, and wisdom. Those are the themes of my interview with Camila Cabello. Enjoy. I'm so excited. I had my wife give me a haircut just for this.
Oh, you look great.
It's weird times. I wish we could do this in person, but of course, here we are.
But here we are. What time is it where you are?
It is 9 o'clock where I am.
Oh, nice. Do you get up at like 3 o'clock in the morning?
I got up at, I think, 6 a.m. this morning, but that's because we have kids, and so we don't have any choice about when we wake up.
Well, I kind of know what you mean more now because we just got a puppy.
Mm-hmm.
And Sean, I told him, I was like, because he's like 9 weeks old, he has to be taken out. Like, we have an alarm on our phone for like 2 a.m. and then in 4 hours for 6 a.m. And Sean, I was like, can you just, he like did all the pee and poo shifts last night. But, and then tonight I'm going to do all the pee and poo shifts. So I'm one step closer to knowing what having kids are like. And let me tell you, can I swear on this?
Yeah, of course.
I respect the shit out of you parents because we have a puppy and shit's been, it's hard. Not hard, but like, it's a lot of work.
No, it is. I think what's good about dogs and then what's good about kids is that it's sort of you can get very used to sort of getting your way and doing things only when you want to do them. And then the nice thing about these sort of responsibilities is that they really don't care at all what you want, what you prefer. It's just sort of inarguable reality.
Totally. And you just like, I have to be present. It just like forces you to be present and also to like laugh and be patient at situation. Like instead of being like so many times, like in the past few days, we're like, no, because he'll like, eat another dog's food or he'll chew something up. And it just like makes you really, really patient. Plus he's cute as fuck.
Oh, no, of course. It's a golden retriever. What's the name?
His name's Tarzan.
Tarzan. Very nice.
It's funny because when we first got him, he was so like docile and calm. We were like, oh, we're gonna pick that one. And then 5 days later, he's just become like a Tasmanian devil. And Sean and I were like, this dog's a genius. Like he just like made us believe he was this calm, like docile dog, and now he's like, ah.
Well, if you think about what dogs like, we don't really realize how manipulative dogs are because dogs were wild animals, and I
Yeah,
think for a long time people thought that we domesticated dogs, but it's really more like dogs domesticated themselves next to us. So like dogs
totally.
basically are just really good at tricking humans into taking care of them, which is a really incredible feat.
Well, have you ever watched The Dog Whisperer
Of course.
and read Caesar Milan? I mean, Caesar Milan is, I feel like he's a low key stoic. Like, you know, even if I don't know if he, like, if he says that, but the way that he teaches, like, we've been reading his book, How to Raise the Perfect Dog. That's like what Sean and I's our reading list. But a lot of what he, like, the way that he teaches, like, uh educating a dog, like he calls it like being a pack leader,
Hmm.
and you know, always kind of like his thing is like your dog is always going to take on your energy. So if you have like frantic anxious energy, like the dog will pick up on that, and like always being like kind of calm and assertive so the dog like trusts you. And it's like it's really really interesting because it makes you realize how much we are really like how much we truly are all animals. Like he, you know, he talks about only rewarding your dog with affection when he does something that you do like, and when he doesn't, like when they're overexcited, just like don't acknowledge them, as opposed to like just treating them like they're like human children and constantly being like, hey, I don't know, it's just like really interesting. Like the dog psychology part of it is really interesting.
I did a show in New York one time, like an interview, and he was the guest before me, and I got to meet him for like 5 minutes. And you can really, there are these people that have like a kind of energy that you just,
Totally.
it's like magical. Like it sounds
So
made
true.
up. Like how could energy like be this thing that is like projected or felt? And then you watch it on TV and you're like, how could you just be like sort of magically calming these dogs? And then you experience it and you're like, oh, this is a real thing. And it's a
100%.
yeah, it's nuts.
Well, I do think like I mean, I think the more I get older, the more I'm realizing how much I mean, we are all energy. And so much of he talks about how, you know, with dogs, it's like no matter how much you say, "No, stop." It's not your words. They don't communicate in that human language part.
Sure.
It's like your body language and your energy, and it's like so much of that is true with humans too. Like no matter what someone says, it's like you can really feel like we are energy. Like even if you're not consciously picking up on that, it's like that's always what's underneath everything. It's
Well, and
yeah,
what I
it's
like about Caesar Milan is this idea that you could really be a master of anything. So like he's
totally.
like the, let's say the best person in the world at that weird dog energy
Yeah.
thing. And I was thinking, I thought about him a couple years ago when we first started sending my kid, my son, who doesn't do it anymore because of the pandemic, but we started sending him to daycare. And like when you have a kid, it's like it's difficult to put them down for a nap, right? They don't want a nap, they run around
Yeah.
like crazy. And then it was thinking that like these two women who were running the daycare. One was from Cuba and the other was
Oh,
from like
cool.
Guatemala or something. And you're like, these two women put down 15 toddlers at the same time every day. And like, I can't even do one. And it's totally like, because I've watched him do
It's
it
like
one time, it's
it's a
totally an energy
craft.
thing. Yeah,
100%. Totally. And then it makes you like when Caesar talks about that, like keeping a calm, assertive energy for your dogs all the time, or especially when you want to discipline them, it makes you practice that muscle more.
sure.
And it's like actually the more that this is what I've been like really focusing on, like especially in the past year, is how to like how much who we are is just like trained behaviors. And like you can, you know, you can train an undisciplined dog. He could literally be a different dog just from how you train them and how you respond to their behaviors. And it's like the same with human beings. It's the same with your own brain. Like your own, I feel like my own brain is a crazy puppy dog that I have to
It
be like,
is.
no, no, you know? But it's like really empowering. I feel like that whole psychology of like how you respond to things changes the things themselves. Like I've become really like obsessed with just like that mastery of like yourself and that mastery of your mind and your emotions. And it just like I feel like is more emphasized by things that I like by the Caesar thing. I'm like, oh, it's there too. Like how everything is what happens and then your response to it.
Well, have you noticed the last 7, 8 months from the pandemic? Have you noticed like what I've noticed is that like as you turn down the outside world, so you're not doing as much stuff, you're not as busy, you don't have as much going on, it sort of reveals to you like my anxiety became more apparent to me. It became much more obvious that I have anxiety because
Yeah.
it wasn't drowned out in other things. Do you know what I mean? And so I'm just curious,
Yeah.
like, have you started to get in touch with energy in your own life?
I mean, I was kind of fucked before the pandemic started. Like I feel like my anxiety was like at an all-time high um before COVID happened. I was like and I was kind of working through it. Like I was like filming a movie. My album had just come out. I was doing promo, but I was like at the same time, it was just like I think that's why I really took in the last year like my own healing and meditation and like all of these and exercise and nutrition, all these things super seriously because I was like I was doing these things. I was like doing promo and filming, but I was just suffering so much because of my state of mind. And I think I had suffered from anxiety like from years before. Like I think like it but it really hit its climax because I don't think I paid enough attention to it and I was just working through it, working through it, working through it. And I think when over the last 7 months that I was able to stop, in the beginning, it was my anxiety specifically because I had time to be aware of my thoughts and what I was thinking and my thought processes, as opposed to I got to go perform, fuck everything I'm feeling because I got to do a good job, which is
Sure,
kind of what I did before. I was just kind of like override all all
sure,
of my just my internal struggles because I was like I got to go on stage in 10 minutes. I can't be thinking about
sure.
this. And it just really gave me time to be able to be in that in the self-awareness and the be in the awareness of what thoughts were causing me suffering and anxiety and feel it and go through it because honestly because I had the time and I hadn't really had the time to really look at what was going on inside myself for like 7 years. I was just constantly I felt like my life was revolving around how to do a good job in my next performance, how to do a good job in my next writing session, whatever. And it's like it feels like that's like the short term solution, but it's not the long term solution because you're actually sacrificing your authenticity and like your truth to just like do a good job as opposed to like be who you are, how you are.
Well, what I found too is that because you're good at what you do, so in your case, it's singing, for me, it's writing, is that the writing or the work is always as difficult as it is and unpredictable as it is, you have way more control over that than other things. So you can
Hmm.
kind of channel all that
Yeah.
energy towards whatever you're supposed to be doing, like putting on a show. Or for me, it's like, I know I can go sit at my computer and stuff that's valuable will come out of it. But like, dealing with my feelings or dealing with the more complicated stuff is much less predictable, and so you kind of end up sort of focusing on work at the expense of everything else.
Totally. And it's scary. It can feel scary to be with your thoughts and feelings because it is like that's also why I mean I feel like honestly stoicism and meditation have helped me the most in the past year, like both of those things, like the kind of I feel like stoicism is kind of like the cognitive reframing of stuff, which is so important because when I the tools that I get from meditation, not even meditation, really mindfulness is the awareness of what my thought processes are. And I'm like, no wonder I have fucking anxiety because look how I'm thinking about this situation.
Sure.
And then Stoicism gives me the tools to be like, well, there's no use in thinking and obsessing about that because I can't control what's going to happen in the future. I can't control, you know, the performance is tomorrow. There's no amount of thinking today that's gonna, if anything, it's not useful, but like I found that the most important thing and the thing that really has given me more peace, most importantly, because I think as I'm getting older, I'm like, I feel like peace is even better than like moments of joy sometimes. Like
Sure.
it's just like so much better. Yeah, I think that like what's giving me more and more peace and more like authenticity when I do my work and when I write and when I do go to work on my craft is like that mental training. I think it's so huge. And I'm like honestly pissed that I didn't get taught those tools in school because I'm like, what the fuck? Like I feel like I had to search and search and search and go through so much suffering. Like I don't know what's been your like experience with anxiety, but like it was fucked. Like it sucks. Like feeling anxious. Like it sucks. And I feel like I was like feeling anxious more than not like 8 months ago, And it's like it's so invaluable to have tools like, you're not your thoughts. You're the observer of your thoughts. Or how can I reframe this situation so it doesn't, so I don't so I don't stress about it or whatever, or breathing, like all of these things, like I feel like are changing my experience of life. And it's like, that's your mind is your life.
Do you feel like you can sort of gut it out? Like you can perform well, anxious, you can write
Definitely.
anxious, but then it's sort of realizing like, oh, actually, when you're doing it from a place of stillness or peace, or when you're not being driven by your thoughts, it's just at like a whole other level.
Definitely. I mean, I think like there's been so many times where I remember like specifically a couple times, which is it was last year really. It was really a span of like 7 months where I feel like I was really struggling with anxiety and like I've talked about this openly before. Like I don't even I don't want to say OCD because I don't know how much of it is I don't know. I don't know how much of it I don't know personally if it helps me to just put a label on something or
Hmm.
but anxiety and like obsessive thoughts for like 6 months. It was just like at a peak and I had two performances that I specifically remember. AMAs and SNL and like I finished SNL and my manager was like that's the best performance you've ever done cuz it does feel like in performance I can channel we were talking about energy. It's like anxious energy or suffering or pain is a lot of energy. And so it felt like I could really channel it and almost like put all of that energy into every word or every movement. And it almost like it's like when Beyonce has said before, nerves are actually a good thing because it's energy. And it suddenly, if you were hitting a move like this, that energy makes you hit it like this because there's so much kind of
Sure.
coming out. But I do think that it's not a good trade off because, especially for example, in something like writing, when it is coming from a place of stillness and peace, like I've seen in the past few months, even like writing for my next project now, it's like, it's so much more authentic. It's so much more truthful. And I'm so much more proud of it because it's not coming from a place of that day trying to get a certain outcome or trying to impress the other person that's in the room or really thinking about anything in the future. Like what's come from me kind of training myself to be present and just be truthful and it coming from a place of stillness I think is so much better, so much more rewarding. And honestly, fuck the result of the performance. It's like you actually end up your life changes. Like you're able to make connections with people because your mind isn't you're not being like your life isn't being drowned out by the noise of your mind. Like there's just it's so worth it to, I feel like, invest in that mental training, because I think a lot of times people are like, I don't know, they look at it as almost like I don't have time to do that because I have to go do my work, and I have to do all of these things. But it's like investing in yourself and in kind of like training your mind to work for you, as opposed to be this thing that actually stops you from being your best self and like blocking you. It's like it's so worth it, and it makes everything else better, you know.
I know exactly what you mean. It's weird to me talking to you because, like, I think you're the first guest that I've had that I'm older than. Because
Oh
I'm
yeah.
so used to being the young person, because that's sort of like you. My
Right.
career started very early, so
Yeah.
all the authors that I've known, or managers and agents, everyone's older.
Mm.
But I remember when I had this sort of epiphany when I was about your age. It was realizing, like, okay, so it's working for me, like the anxiety, the intensity, the energy. I'm getting good results out of it, but it's not sustainable. Like, I don't want to be in
No.
that sort of adrenalized state for the next like 30 years. Like, you're not
No.
going to survive that way. And so it's sort of realizing, like, if you're not having any fun doing it, and if it's not coming from a place of stillness and contentment, like, you're going to burn out or die if you keep going this way.
100%. Well, I think what happened to me right before the pandemic was I did burn out. Like that's what it felt like for me. Like I felt burnt out. I felt honestly like I was like I don't know if I want to do this anymore, but it wasn't doing this. It was the way that I was doing it.
Right.
You know, it was like I was like I don't know if I want to do this anymore. It's so much anxiety, so much stress. I feel unhappy. I feel like my mental health, therefore my physical health is suffering. Like I wasn't sleeping well. Like all of these, I wasn't sleeping well. I felt like my nervous system was out of whack because I feel like it was just a habit for me to be in this kind of fight or flight state. Yeah, I forgot where I was going with that. What were you just saying before that?
Well, just like how you can sustain this, because I think
Oh
what's
yeah,
interesting
yeah,
is,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
most singers in your position, it seems like they have a meltdown in their mid 30s, right? Like, it doesn't
Yeah, you
seem to
emailed me that.
last.
100%. Well, I think that I would have. I would have at some point. It would have been unsustainable, and I would have been like, I actually have to stop. I don't know when I'm gonna come back and do this, but at this point, my health is suffering, and I have to stop. And I was kind of forced to stop
Right. We all were.
by everything that happened, and I it was like it was really necessary time. Like it was necessary for me to kind of go through really just like I wrote this article about like for Mental Health Awareness Month about OCD and about anxiety, and it's like with anything, it's like with your physical health, if you break a leg, like you gotta heal the leg, and nobody's like judging you for it. You just like take some time, and you get a cast, and you can't walk for 5 days because it's you gotta recover. And I think like with mental health, it's like it's different. It's nothing's gonna happen if you just do nothing, but it is worth taking time to treat it. Even if it's like 10 minutes a day of like doing exercise or doing something that that is good for your mental health, or like really there's so many different things. But in the past 8 months I feel like I've like literally my life has changed. Like I'm like so thankful for it, because I think that I would have spent a lot of years being unhappy, and at the same time this weird thing of just like not like just keeping going because you think that's what you're supposed to do. And yeah, I'm just like I'm so thankful for this time, because I feel like I'm like more and more just the boss of my own mind, and the boss of my own life, as opposed to feeling kind of like victimized by anxiety and and mental health struggles. Like I feel like that was like constantly something that I had to overcome to do things. And now I kind of like did it the other way, where I'm like, I'm going to get to the root of this fucker so that I can, so I can just like be free of it. And it's totally possible.
No, that's something the Stoics talk about, which is like, what good is success if the result is that you don't feel like you're in charge of your own mind or your own life. Like how is that success?
Exactly. And that's like not what this society, we as a society are taught. And actually so much of I feel like healing is being like, what of this is like what I actually want and what of this is just like what everybody else is doing and I'm doing it because everybody else is doing it. Like that, and stillness is the key. Like that really resonated with me. Like, what's your definite, and ego is the enemy too, when it's like all of these questions about like, what is success to you? Like, is success being famous and having these awards? And I feel like it's especially a necessary teaching nowadays because I have like, my little cousin who's like 8 years old, and I'm like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she's like, I want to be TikTok famous. And
Right.
I'm like, it's like these values of like, no, what's important is, how content you are with your life, like the level of gratitude that you experience. The most importantly for me right now, like the connections that you have with your family and your friendships and your community, and your purpose. Like I genuinely do feel like my purpose is in art. I don't think I actually, even though it's always been my passion, my favorite thing to do. Like, I feel like in the past 8 months, I really was like, oh no, this is like what I want to do. Like this is
Sure.
like what I feel like my purpose is. And it's like not doing it for any outcome of like being famous or success or what people think of you, which it can subconsciously, like, I know, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but like, even when you don't say that to yourself, like, I've never been like, I want to be the most famous. I want to be number one. I've never said that. But I remember like reading Ego is the Enemy and being like, but then at the same time, I go to do a writing session and I care so much about what these people in the room think of me. Like, I'm like so insecure and afraid, and like that's ego too, because I'm still not doing it for the right reasons. Like the the right reason is to tell my truth. That's it. Period.
There's a great Marcus Aurelius quote. He says, we care about ourselves more than other people. He says, but we care about other people's opinion more than our own.
Right. Love
And
that quote.
it's so true. Like you pour yourself into this thing, doing it the way that only you want to do it, and then all of a sudden it comes out, and then what you're thinking is like, did other people say it's good or not? And sometimes you need a project. I did a book a few years ago, this book called Conspiracy, which I think is my best book, but it sold the least well out of all
Right.
of them. It didn't like
Right.
fail, it just didn't do maybe what it could have done. And what was really freeing about that experience was it totally decoupled like critical success and sales for me from like what I know is good. And that's like, it was such a huge breakthrough.
It was such a huge breakthrough for me when I saw, like a couple months ago, I was like, I read Obstacle is the Way, like I think like 2 years ago. And that was actually my for my second album. I read, a
Wow.
friend of mine gave me that book. And so I read it, and I remember like reading it, and then for the next like 2 months while I was reading it, like my writing sessions were like amazing, because everything, even my own insecurity and my own like fear, I was kind of using it to fuel. I was doing that Stoic teaching that I love so much, the amor fati, the taking
Hmm.
everything and even the bad stuff and loving that it happened, not just accepting it, but being like, oh, I'm going to use this now. And that's the first time I read that book. Then like 2 years later, I read Stillness is the Key. And that was actually that was like a year ago, actually. That's when I was going through the height of my mental health crisis. And that really impacted me. And then during quarantine, I read Ego is the Enemy, and I started really getting into Stoicism, and I got like the Daily Stoic journal, and I was reading the Daily Stoic videos. And one video that really resonated with me was the one where you're talking about how Stoics define success, and the internal scoreboard, and
Yeah.
how it's like there's success that's like, okay, how many views did this get? How many likes did this get? How successful is this song or this album going to be? And that's all the things that you can't control. So if you measure success like that, or what other people in the room think of me, then you're going to be unhappy your whole life. But if you change your definition of success, which I've really been practicing when I've been writing for this album. If I change my definition of success to how honest was I today? How vulnerable was I today? How, did I show up completely as myself? Was I kind to people? Did I see people? Did I make this a fun experience for everybody in the room? Like if I just keep it in terms of, if I just focus on what I can control in this moment, then at the end of every day, I was like, it was a successful day. Even if I did feel anxious or nervous, I was like, my metric of success was, hey guys, I feel a little nervous, and I was truthful, and therefore I met with my like standard of success. And it's like, that's so much more important. Like it's so much more important to be the person that you want to be, and lead with that, than like how other people perceive you or what people perceive you. Like that's like what I love about stoicism, and like what I feel like is going to be my philosophy of life forever, is like, which it wasn't before. Like I feel like I was leading with what I was doing instead of who I was being. It's like, I just like, now I'm so conscious of like me being, brave and courageous and kind, and and truthful, and my character comes before any of the things that I do, you know.
it one of the reasons I think it's important too, it's not just like decoupling success from results because like you could fail or whatever. But I remember I was watching the Taylor Swift documentary, the Netflix
Yeah.
one a few months
Yeah.
ago, and she's talking about this moment where she wins like album of the year, she has the number
Mm,
one album of the year, all these things, and she's just sort of like, now what? Like she's
yeah.
unhappy because she got everything she wanted, and that's a
Yeah.
real thing too. You can if you have told yourself this lie that like I will be happy when I accomplish X, then you get X, and it's really disappointing. And that's when you also kind of realize like, oh, you can't be doing it for these external things. You have to be doing it because you love music, and the byproduct is these extra things.
Totally. Totally. And that's like where I feel like the meditation stuff has been really useful, is that it's constantly like your brain is always telling you, is always like stuck in the past or in the future, where in the future things will be better, or in the past things were better, or in the past things were bad and now they're still going to be bad, or in the future this might happen, so that's going to be scary, and now this moment is bad. It's like, but none of that is true. And it's like, you also, another stoic teaching that I love is like, you could fucking die at any moment.
Sure.
So it's like, why would you put it off? It's like, also it's like the stuff that you're practicing in your mind, and who you're practicing being as a person in this moment, is who you're going to be in 6 months from now, if you keep doing it the same way. Like, if you are always like looking at what you don't have, and what you need to be happy, then that habit in your brain, it's like a pattern, like that's not gonna stop. And I feel like I also discovered about myself, like in the past year, like I don't really see myself as like, I don't think I've ever been a negative person or a pessimistic person. Like I think I'm pretty optimistic. I'm like pretty like bubbly and like and hopeful, but I have recognized like within my own mind how much, like, which is what anxiety is. It's like anticipating the future, or not being present enough to see like what's going on around you. And yeah, just like I've been practicing that lately a lot. It's just like looking around and being like, oh, I'm like so grateful to like have water, and like be talking to one of my favorite authors, and you know have a puppy. Like I'm so grateful for puppies, that puppies exist. Like just like the practice of always looking around and like training that muscle of like wonder and and gratitude, it's like that I'm like just like excited for 10 years from now when hopefully that's just like a personality trait and not something that I have to practice, but like it does, things do become like actual personality traits when you practice them. Just like anxiety. Then I was like, "Oh fuck, I'm an anxious person," but I'm not. It's just that's what I've been practicing.
Yeah. Yeah. A friend of mine was saying something they were talking about. They were like, I don't like, they'd always felt that they were like scared of driving at night. They didn't like driving at night. And then
Yeah.
they realized they're like, oh, no, no, my mom is scared of driving at night. And I just like
Right.
picked that up. They're like, that's
Yeah.
not actually who I am. And that they were like, I can discard that and just practice a new skill where
Yeah.
I am not scared of driving at night.
Totally. I actually have that. My grandma has a fear of birds. And sometimes like birds will be flapping and I'll be like, and I'll be like, "Wait, why am I oh, it's my grandma's fear." It's weird.
It's
There
just
is
made
also
up.
it's made up. And there is also, I don't know how much of this is theory and how much of it is science. And this might be, I actually want to be careful with that because I'm not sure. But it is like some stuff is passed down like through your genes and stuff. I don't know if a fear of birds is, but you can, but what is
You can
also like, I
reinforce
think,
it over and over
yes,
again. Yes.
you can almost like turn on or turn off the gene based on like what you do. Um, this is my second ever podcast.
Really? What was the first one?
My vocal teacher is starting a podcast.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, and so we did a podcast about singing. Sean did it too. But this is my second ever one. Am I doing a good job?
You're doing great. You're doing great. I let
Ego is the enemy.
no, to go back to what you were saying about being happy for water and a dog. I think the Stoics talk about like how little is actually needed to have a happy or a
Yes,
good life. And
so
I think
true.
one of the things COVID has done is sort of shrink our expectations for what we need. And
Yes.
it's been nice for me. I'd be curious about this for you. Like, I found that once I sort of started looking much more inward, started looking much more around my immediate surroundings, and I have a lot less interest in what other people are doing. And that's
Same.
contributed to my happiness in a huge way. It's hard for people to realize, like, I remember I had dinner with this billionaire a few years ago, and he was like talking to me about the Forbes list. Like, he was talking about like the other people on the Forbes list, and it's like, you're a billionaire and you're even still, you're like
100%.
comparing yourself to other people. But that idea that comparison is the thief of joy, because it makes it, instead of being able to appreciate that you have a puppy, you're like, oh, but somebody has, a mansion and a puppy, and therefore
Right.
I'm deficient for not having both.
Totally. I mean, that's so true. And like what's sad is that's probably like that trait is probably a big part of why he's a billionaire because he was
Sure.
constantly like, "Oh, this person has more than me. I got to work harder and like that's something that I feel like is kind of subconsciously taught to us too is that competitive thing. Like I know I feel like even probably more I've seen it so much in my industry of like, you know, I felt it within myself, like just being like, oh my God, like I have so much to be grateful for. Like I look at where I started. I never thought I would be here. The fact that I even get to do this is fucking insane. And then I experienced this so much like when I would go to award shows where it's like they do this thing at award shows. It's great for your ego in the good and bad way. It's totally sarcastic. But they call out everybody's names and then like everybody, the people around will
Sure.
clap and it's like I remember going to award shows and they'd be like Ariana Grande, wah! And they'd be like Camila Cabello and like they would in my mind they would be clapping a lot less for me and I'd be like, "Oh my God." And it would just like affect you so much to the point where like you would go up to get an award and you'd be like, "Oh my God, I don't deserve this." Like I heard it in the room. Not as many people clapped for me. And then then there's the thing that happens in your brain where you're like, "I got to work harder. I got to work hard." And it's like it's I hate that version of myself. Like I don't hate that, but I don't that's not a pleasant version of myself because then once I'm out of that space, especially now that I have been for like a year, it's like you want to be like, who cares? Like I'm just happy to be here. Like whatever, and you want to be happy for the people that got, the loudest cheers and the most awards. Like it's like really enforced, probably in all industries, but I can speak about like the music industry. Like there is this sense of competition and constantly like, you know, trying to be the number one. And I have to say, like, I do feel that when I'm at award shows and if I'm on social media, and I'm looking at what every other artist is doing, like there is that part of you that'll be like, I gotta work harder, I gotta do more. But I have always felt like this is actually my favorite chapter in probably any of the books, but in Stillness is the Key, when you talk about this metaphor for, it's like if everybody on this planet plus the planet is one human body, it's like there's the person that, symbolizes the eye, and the eye's got to be the best eye, not the best hand, just got to be the best eye. And that kind of metaphor for all of our roles really, I feel like, stuck with me, because I've always felt like maybe it's like it's not everybody's job to be number one. It's just your job to be you. Like the world needs you to be you. And it's like even that book Conspiracy, it's like even if it sold less than all the other books, there's a group of people that fucking loved it. And it really affected them deeply, and nobody could have done that except for you. And it's like I feel like that about some people that are like, some meditation teachers, or people, you know people that maybe not a lot of people know, or singers or artists that not a lot of people know, but for me they've affected me so deeply.
Sure.
And it's like I feel like I've really carried that, and I'm gonna try to always carry that next time I go to one of those award shows, and just be like, I can only just like be the best me. And if five people like really resonated with what I said, like that's great. And maybe that person is meant to, it's like they're the eye, and I'm the hand. I just got to be the best hand. But that really takes the pressure off when I go into the studio. Like I'm not like trying to get a number one song. I'm just trying to be as true to myself as possible, because that's what is going to deeply, not superficially, but I think deeply affect people.
Well, look, and you
Maybe
could
that's not true. I don't know.
no, you gotta, you're doing the song and you could die before the song comes out. So
So
you have to
true.
think about whether it was just whether it was its own reward. I think that's where I try to think about that. It's like, look, think about all the authors whose books came out after they died and then were a success. So like they didn't get to enjoy any of that. So if
It's
they
so
didn't
true.
enjoy making it, that's really, really sad. If they weren't
It's
proud of
fucked.
it when they finished, that's like the saddest thing in the world.
And I've actually had experiences where I didn't have a great time that day in the studio, and that song became successful, and I ended up really disliking the song. Like I never liked it, even if it
Yeah,
was successful. I didn't even
really.
want to perform it. And like my team would be mad at me and be like, but this has this many streams, and I'd be like, I don't like that. I don't like it. I'm not going to perform it. And I didn't.
Wow.
Because- but I've actually like, you know, I've kind of, I gotta say, I gotta pat myself on the back, because I have always been really like ruthless about, I don't, not really like giving a fuck about the the commercial success part. Like I do have like I think subconscious fears about like if I'm writing, like what people in the room think of me, and if I'm writing with Pharrell, I'm like, I really want him to think that I'm good.
Sure.
I have I have that thing, but I definitely like the whole Billboard, the charts, and like writing stuff for it to, be a number one and sound like everything else on the radio. Like I've always like really not been into that. And when I don't like something, like I just like I won't do it, because I'm just like I can't do it.
I wrote this email for Daily Stoic, which I'll forward to you. It was a couple years ago, but it struck me once. I was listening to, I don't know, it was like hits of the 90s on Spotify or something. And I'd heard of like most of the songs because that's sort of when I was a teenager. And then it was like, then I was listening to like 80s. and I knew a lot of the songs because I like sort of heavy metal and stuff. And then I went seven. I was going backwards in time, and it was interesting to me how quickly these were the biggest songs of that
Right.
period. How quickly not only like I wasn't like super familiar with them, but some of them like I'd not only never heard the song before, I hadn't even heard the name of the person who'd done it. Right.
Right.
And that's something the Stoics talk about, which is just kind of how ephemeral it all is. And so if you're
Totally.
not enjoying it, and if you're doing it because you've deluded yourself into thinking that you're going to be like famous for all time, and this will be this legacy that lasts forever, you're really depriving yourself of the present moment, which is all that you have.
It's so true. It's so true. I had a friend who once told me like, we were speaking about like legacy, and he was just like, legacy is like for everybody else.
Yeah.
Like it's like
No, you're dead.
it's not something that you get to enjoy. And it's also like who I always remind myself this like is anybody really gonna care like in a million years? Like who
No.
even knows if we're gonna be here? Like who
Right.
know, who knows? Like who was the most the hundreds of thousands of years ago, and we were just like in tribes, and there was like a famous singer woman around the campfire. Like she was the best one, but I don't know her name.
Right.
Like it is like that's such a refreshing concept. It really is. And that's like something that Ego is the Enemy taught me too. I was just like, when I get so riled up about a writing session or an interview or a performance, I am truly thinking too much of myself. Like nobody cares that much. And like the people that do, like I actually I just finished filming Cinderella, which is like my first film that I ever did, and I was Cinderella, which is crazy.
Incredible.
But talk about that. I mean, it was amazing, but it's like it felt like a pretty high pressure thing to do. I'd never been in a film before, and I was the lead role for my first film, and that took a lot of like really. I had a lot of like mental uh like tools for me to show up every day and be able to have fun and not really make that pressure the focus. Like I remember, I actually do you know Michael Gervais?
Yeah, I do. Uh-huh.
Okay, so I work with him.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that how
I
you
work
found
with
out
him.
about my books?
No,
Oh, okay. No,
no, I
Michael's
found out about.
amazing.
Yeah. He told me that you guys are friends, and there's been many times where we talk on the phone, and I'm like, I was reading Ryan Holiday's book, and he's like, Ryan, he's a good friend of mine. Um, and anyway, so I was I've talked to Michael Gervais a lot, and while I was doing the filming, um, I would talk to him about just like the stuff that I was experiencing. I'd be like, hey, tomorrow is a big scene. I'm feeling nervous, whatever. And he was just like, he's given me a lot of wisdom about when I do get nervous before things like writing sessions or wherever that I'm going to be like in a vulnerable place. Cause doing that film was like really, it's really vulnerable. Acting is really vulnerable because it's like you have to be so present. There's no outsmarting it. There's no like practicing the line before and then you like it's like all of it is really reacting to what's going on in front of you and being present. And I had to kind of like make peace with the fact that this is for I remember I was like when I first came back from the pandemic because we shot it over two different periods of time. I came back and I was like I was feeling nervous when I saw the camera and when the camera was in front of me, and he was like, you're equating the camera with who, with what? And I was like, people, like people that are judging my performance and people. And he's like, okay, how do we like turn that around? Who would you want the camera to symbolize or represent? And I was like, just like like a a young girl that's like a fan of mine, and she's just like wide eyed and she's excited and she had a bad day and she just like wants some joy. She's looking for some joy when she watches this movie. And we actually like named I named the camera after like one of my like closest fans. Her name's Julia, and I just would picture her there. And it's like anytime I'm nervous, I just picture, who is this really for? Like, it's really for my fans. Like,
Sure.
it's for Julia, it's for Aurora, it's for Steph. I'm naming, actually, I'm naming some fans, for Dom. Shout out. But it's like these people that you are like, it's just as simple as that. It's not about your legacy or being the greatest of all time or anything like that. Like, if that happens, like, cool. But it's just to make people happy. It's like not really, doesn't have to be more complex than that. And that's like the most rewarding, I feel, like, way of thinking about it for me. It's like that was my purpose in that movie. It wasn't even to prove that I'm like a great actress or whatever. Like, I just, I, if I just made them smile and made them happy, like, that's who it's for. It's not for any kind of outcome or reputation or praise.
Yeah, there's a Bertrand Russell quote where he's saying like the first sign of an impending nervous collapse is the belief that your work is terribly, terribly important.
So
And
true.
and you
I've
can
experienced it firsthand.
yeah, it's because it is important to you, and because it is important to your livelihood, and because there is pressure, you sort of internalize it all, and it becomes this like massive thing. And it's like it's really, it's like you're in my case, it's like you're writing words on the computer. Like this is not that
Totally.
important.
100%. 100%. And like I feel like the idea of which I feel like extends beyond like what you do. It's like I have found, like, especially in the last 8 months, like how important it is to have to feel a sense of purpose, no matter what you do. Like, it doesn't matter if you're in the arts or if you're a doctor or if you're a teacher or if you are, it doesn't matter if you're an Uber driver. It doesn't matter. Like, I think like having a sense of purpose makes life so much better, because if you're like, my purpose is just to make people smile today, my purpose is to, make people believe in the goodness of other people. Like, I think like when you like wake up every day thinking that, it just like, you don't want to waste a day because you have a job to do. I actually read over the past 8 months. I don't know if I think you have read it because you quoted a lot, the Gita, the Bhagavad
Of
Gita.
course.
I loved it. It really impacted me. I loved like the way that they describe when they said, you have the right to work, you don't have the right to the fruits of your work.
Yeah. Have you read Stephen Pressfield at all?
No.
So you would love Stephen Pressfield. He wrote a book called The War of Art, which I think is like the best book about the sort of creative process ever written.
Cool.
But he also he made a novel about it called the Legend of Bagger Vance, which is also a movie with Will Smith and Matt Damon. But that
Wow.
is like sort of a modern. It's the Bhagavad Gita, but applied to a professional golfer. But his
Wow.
stuff is amazing. And I think
That's
it's like
cool.
you have to have this sense of purpose and this sense of sort of it fitting in a large tradition. Like so it's weird. I think on the one hand you're like, I'm just scribbling words down on the computer, like this isn't that
Yeah.
important. But then also what you were saying, where you were like, tens of thousands of years ago there was some woman who was like singing as part of a tribe. That's the other thing though, where I think you get purpose, is you go, oh, but I'm also part of this really long tradition, that it's not about me, but this thing goes back eons and eons, and that you take your identity and your purpose from being sort of like one speck on a really long line.
Totally. And I find that to be like so much more comforting than just like being on your own and then everybody else. Like, it's so much more comforting to know. And I really do believe that that's the truth, that we are all one. We are all like little cells in this big body, this big system that we can't even understand. But it's like all of our actions and our energy and like, and really, and our energy and how we are, like, it really has a ripple effect, like a huge ripple effect. And yeah, that's like a really comforting thing to think, in my opinion, that we are like, we're not alone. We're all like deeply, deeply interconnected with each other and with nature. And it's like we're not ever alone, because we're part of this huge, like, higher intelligence. Like that's where we came from.
There's a joke that every writer wishes they were a musician, and I think it's because like you get to experience that when you perform, right? Like you
Yeah,
get to watch 20,000 people come together as one entity that you're in charge of, but you're also a part of yourself. That must be very overwhelming emotionally to experience.
definitely. I mean, it's really it's really beautiful. It's really beautiful to see people like tapped into this to this thing. I mean, music is so incredible for that's like my favorite part of like being a human and not any other animal is like is music. Um and delicious food. But yeah, I mean it's amazing. I'm just like remembering because I don't remember the last time I played a show. Like I think it must have been like a year and a half ago or something like that. But it's really beautiful. And like when you see people like sing stuff and they're like crying and really see like them kind of experiencing like a catharsis of their own life and their own emotions, and like you're doing that too, but you're all kind of doing it there together. Like it's a really beautiful sense of community, and like where you see like how your story makes a difference. You know, like sharing your story exactly as you would share it makes a really big difference. And that's what I like. Another thing that I feel like has been a common theme for me, like especially when I was doing the movie, like I was like, I'm not trying to be like, I'm not trying to be a good actress. I'm not trying to do a good job. I just have to be me. And like, and with all of my shit, like all of my anxieties and this and that and my struggles and this, like the world needs everybody to be exactly who they are and share their story exactly as they are, because the more like specific you get, I feel like the less people feel alone, because everybody is like, there's nothing new that you and I have felt that somebody else hasn't. And that's like what makes you feel less alone, is when people are like open to sharing that. And I you definitely feel that in a show.
Do you know Casey Neistat?
Oh my God, this is so funny because Sean asked me that same question 2 months ago, because he and Sean are friends, because Sean is obsessed with like taking videos now, and
Yeah.
Casey gave him a camera.
Yeah, so Casey's amazing. And I remember he did this video a couple years ago where he was showing like he was like different levels of art. So there's like, or inventions, like you make something and it's great. You make something and it's popular, that's great. You make something that's really popular, it's great, or whatever. But he was talking about how like the ultimate form of art is to make art that helps people make more art. and
Love.
and so he's like, the iPhone may be the greatest invention of all time because like
Mm,
think of all the
mm,
things that people have done
mm-hmm.
with their phones. But what I think is so powerful about music is that it's great itself. Like when you listen to a great song and it has some amazing guitar solo in it, or it's like emotionally vulnerable and it's beautiful, or just the singer is doing something incredible with their voice. But what I think is like, do you ever think about like, so you have songs that have done like a billion plays. Do you ever think about like what people have done with that? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, think about
Yeah,
the
yeah,
art
yeah.
that your art has helped people make because they were painting while one of your songs was on in the studio, or you know what I mean?
Totally. Totally. I mean, that's such a cool thing to think about, like that ripple effect. And like I've seen like with my own fans, like, them sending me videos of them doing covers, or like them learning how to play guitar to this one song of mine. A couple of like a few of my fans have written poetry books because they've like gotten into poetry. Like, yeah, it is like that conversation that just like inspires people, because art is like, it's just so cool. Like it's just like we get to make things. Like it's so cool. Sorry, that was this that was not a very eloquent
No,
sentence.
no, there's sort of an ineffableness to it, right? It's like you just, well, there's a Longfellow poem where he talks about like sort of footprints in the sands of time, that's what art
Yeah.
is. there's a Latin saying, I forget what it is, but basically the saying is like life is short, but art is long. And that like
It's beautiful.
you can capture something in a moment when like I wrote my first book when I was 25, and that book is
Cool.
still relevant. And it's like, I've moved on, but that book is still there and people are still interacting with it. And yeah, you see what it helps people do. It's just, to me, that's the ultimate reward of doing the stuff. Much more so than any like sort of sales or charts. It's like, if your thing impacts
Totally.
one person, you're like, wow.
Yeah, and it's also like I feel like when you're really old, like when you're like 90 or something, you can look back on it and be like, this is who I was at this point in time. I can't do that now because it's too cringy. But
Yeah.
but when you're old, you'd be like, oh my God, or you could show your kids, like your kids are gonna read your books. Like that's so your grandkids are gonna read your books. Like that is so cool. That's really cool. There's this phrase that I really love um, about music. Actually, it's about art in general, but my I have this acting coach who is this like incredible person. He's also an author. You should read his book. He has a few, but he has one called At Right Brain Turn Left, or At Left Brain Turn Right, or something.
Okay.
But anyway, there was this phrase that he actually just directed a film too, and there's this line in it that's like, these aren't just phrases, they're human outcries.
Oh, sure.
And I just like love that. About that really makes me think of music, because so much of the time it's like the chord progression or what you're saying, like I feel like that, especially when I'm like just kind of listening to chords and just making melodies or doing ad libs. It's like it's coming from this place of no thought. It's just coming from a place of feeling, or just like full, just like feeling. Like it's just like, because I find when I'm like really in my head, I can't even ad lib. Like I can't, because it's just is all feeling. And I think for my personality type, because sometimes I'm like, I say sometimes now, probably a couple years ago would have been most of the times, I'm like so in my head that it's a really nice like medicine for that. And it's yeah, it's like so like it's almost like, what's the word? So like primal. You know what I mean? Something
No,
so
that's
primal
why
about
writers
it.
are jealous of musicians, because like what you're able to do instantaneously, it requires like hundreds of pages for a book to do.
But
Like,
it does but it's different, because sometimes musicians wish they could be writers, because you can very like you can leave people with in instructional wisdom, like
sure.
just like it is, like it's just like, this is, you can touch people in a really really direct way, like super like life changing way. I feel like they're different, and then some songs can do that, but in music it's like you have to dilute it so much that it is actually more of a feeling than like than words of wisdom. It's just like a almost like you captured a feeling in a jar, and it's like
Hmm.
you open the jar and it's like whoosh, and that's like the feeling, whether it's like, being in love or sadness or empowerment. It's almost like this jar of like emotion that's like exploding. And then writing is like, it's just so like it's exactly what you want to say. So musicians want to be writers too. Sean and I we've been like, I'm gonna write a book now.
Well,
but
that I would
but
your expression that a song is like an emotion in a jar is very beautiful, because I was going to ask you, I have this super weird habit when I write. When I listen to music, it's almost always like I might hear a song of yours and be like, I like that song, and then I will listen to that song on repeat for like 200 times,
That's
and
so
then I'll
funny.
probably not listen to it again. But so when I write,
Me too.
it's almost like I have these disposable songs. So like I'll pick something, and then that I'm just trying like, and you play it on repeat to a way where it all kind of blurs together, and then you almost like kind of disassociate a little bit, and then that's where my writing comes from. And so for me, it's like it's always about finding that like hit, like that sense of that some magical song that captures what I need, and then I want
Wait,
to
so
like
then wait, so
go
you
ahead.
listen to a song over and over,
Yeah.
and then you kind of repeat it over and over until like, and that's the emotion that you want, and then that'll inspire you to write?
No, it's like I'll hear a song and be like, I like that song, and then that goes, and then it's like I'm like a vampire, just like sucking all of
Right.
that out. So while I'm writing, this is why I can't ever share an office. I'll have to like listen to that song on full volume, like in every room of the space, just playing over and over and over and over and over again. I'm almost like a vampire. I just suck it
Right.
all the life out of it until I it doesn't mean anything else to me, and then I move on to the next song. Is that weird?
You think that it doesn't mean anything else to you, but then when you listen to that song 1 year from now or 2 years from now, it's gonna take you back to
That's
when you were
true.
listening to it all the time. Because there are songs that like, I mean, there's songs that Sean and I would play basically the same 8 songs like the first couple months that we were dating, and I put those songs on now, and I literally feel like I'm gonna have some kind of stroke because it just takes me back to like my heart like starts racing. It's crazy. It just really takes you back to that time. But it's because it's working now. It's because we like obsessively played them. I actually feel like I have a different relationship with music now
How
since
so?
the pandemic. Well, I feel like I used to like my sister's 13 and she listens to music all the time, but like she listens to really intense songs all the time just in the background. Like, we were talking and she's like has Yellow by Coldplay on like over and over and over,
That's a good example of a song that, yeah, I might play like 200
over
times.
and over. Right.
And right. But yeah, as your point, I do remember hearing that song when I was in 10th grade, and
Yeah.
it like now represents that to me.
Totally. And if you played it, you'd probably have this whole like flashback reel. But I think nowadays I can't I it like I have realized how much music like really certain songs with words really are such a like mood dictator for me. Like they really trigger an emotional response. So I don't just have them like I'm not really like I don't really passively listen to music. Like if I have music on in the background, it's just like instrumental stuff or more like ambiance, like, Spanish guitar or something just in the background, but I can't really like listen to songs passively anymore. Like the other day I went to the dentist and I had to go to the dentist and it was like they had like a TV playing, like HGTV and songs from like the early 2000s playing and the dentist was talking to me and I was like this is so much stimulation. Like it's insane. I couldn't focus on what she was saying cuz when a song is playing like I'll just gravitate towards the song, but it just made me think like it's just so I don't know. Like I can't I have to listen to songs when I'm like I'm gonna really like watching a movie.
Do you
Because
listen to music when you
otherwise,
read?
I actually don't. Maybe I think I would if it was. I mean, I could not do music songs with words while reading because that would be insane. But I could probably do some like instrumental. But it just like I feel like it still dictates the mood so much. Like it taints what you're reading. Like if I start to hear like some piano music and it's sad, immediately I'll have like nostalgic thoughts or like a nostalgic feeling. If it like really colors the mood. So I'm
But to
like
bring
I'm more intentional about it now.
but to bring this full circle, in the way that like Caesar Milan is like somehow on the wavelength with a dog because he spent
Yeah.
so many countless hours doing it, I got to imagine, given your relationship with music and what it's meant in your life, you probably feel it at a level that like a normal person can listen to music in the background, but you are
Right.
you know what I mean? That's like your superpower, is
Yeah,
your
yeah, yeah.
ability to connect with words and with sound.
That's actually true. I hadn't thought about it like that, but that might be true. Because the other day we were like, I hadn't listened to songs with words in a while, and Sean put on like John Mayer's like Continuum, and I was like, he put on like Dreaming with a Broken Heart, and I was like, this is crazy. It's just like so. I don't. Yeah, I think you're right. Especially when I've kind of like just been listening to instrumental chill stuff. Like when I put on like a song like that, it's like such a stark difference between like passive instrumental music and like a breakup song. It's like
I
you can
think
really feel it.
I think there's a John Mayer song in each one of my books that was like a repeat song that I probably listened to a
Really?
couple hundred
That's
times.
so
Yeah,
cool. Are you
yeah.
a John Mayer fan?
I am, but it's more like in the sense that like there's a handful of songs that I really like, but
Yeah. What's your
and what's
favorite?
well, so he has a cover of Free Fallin' by Tom Petty that I think is almost as good as the original.
Come on. I think it's better than
It's so good. It's a
the original.
that
I
like
love
that's
that
a
song.
that I may have listened to that one during stillness. It may have been ego. I don't remember, but I probably listened to that song like 300 times, 400 times. So
Me
you know,
too.
in a
Me
row.
too.
Yeah.
Actually, that was my number one most listened to song when I was like 14. It was
Yeah.
my number one song. So I listened to it 300 times too. Like now, I feel like I know every part of that song. Like if my voice could do 8 instruments, I could. That's how many times I've listened to that song. It's so good.
No, it's incredible. And but even like we were talking about like what a musician can do in just such a short amount of time. Like even the opening chords in that song, like in the Tom Petty version, you're just like that's just I think there's a handful of songs that'll hit me and you're just like this is what mastery feels and looks
Yes.
like. Like this is the
Yeah.
culmination of a lifetime created these
Right.
3 seconds of music.
Right. Well, I have a question. I'm curious about because we've been talking and you're like you write every single day.
Hmm. Pretty
No
much.
matter what. So but like let's say new book came out yesterday. Are
Yeah.
you writing this morning?
So the day that still of my most recent book came out, which is Lives of the
The
Stoics,
Stoics.
I was finishing the draft of my next book.
Wow. That's cool.
So this is actually something I'm jealous of with musicians, where like you can put out an album like right away. Lives was finished in January of 2020 and it just came out.
Okay.
So it just
Wow.
takes so much longer most of the time. I mean, they can rush books out, they just don't. But I'm
Right.
usually one book ahead. So I've already finished my next
That's
book.
cool.
It's
That's
going into editing now, but like I'm in editing
wow.
of the next book.
So how many hours a day, how much time a day do you spend writing? And is it every day,
It's
including
it's
weekends?
it's almost every day. I'll definitely write on the weekend, but it's a different routine because like weekends are more for family. So I might
Yeah.
like do a like usually what will happen is like I'll be working out and I'll have some idea and that'll be like a Daily Stoic email or something like that. But
Right.
not
Right.
usually not working on a book on the weekends. Um, but like I try to like sit down at my desk to write usually like 8:30 or 9 and I'll be done by like 11 at the latest. So it's usually
That's
like
cool.
2.5 hours. And then just that
Right.
cumulatively over a long period of time adds up to books.
That's cool. I feel like I need to integrate that. I feel like I need to like have a routine with writing music as opposed to like when I feel inspired.
Yeah, I think so. So read this book, The War of Art. It's
Okay.
like I think it's the best book about the creative process ever written. But his point is like you have to put he's like you have to put your ass where you want your heart to be,
Yes.
which is an expression I love. And it's like
Love.
um, if you he has this idea of the resistance. Basically, it's like we all want to make great art all the time, but then the resistance gets in the way. And so if you only write when you're inspired, I think you're in a tricky spot because like your
I
mind can
agree.
always come up with reasons why you're not inspired.
Totally. 100%. No, I know. I know.
So
Yeah.
I love the routine, but then it's also I think writing books is like you have to get you probably like this where like when you're writing you're in a different headspace. It's like training for a fight or something,
Right.
or like
Right.
training to go into space. I remember I had this dream once when I was this is I forget which book it was, but I had some like I remember I had this dream and it was like I was getting in a rocket ship and it was blasting off. And when I woke up from the dream, it was like, oh, it's time to start the book that I'd been researching. Like it was like it's time to go. And so I've more gotten to a place where instead of having this like start and stop where it's like I'm training and then then I'm taking a break, I'd rather just be in fighting at my fighting weight
In
all the
flow.
time. So just never stop.
Yeah. That's so smart. I love that. I'm definitely integrating that. That's cool.
Well, I'll let you go because this has probably been way too much of your time. But we should talk routine. To me, I think if you don't have a routine
Yes.
or a practice, you're just getting by on like your sheer talent and
I agree.
and like your youthful energy. But when you really look, it's like, how is LeBron James still performing at the level he's performing at? It's because it's a machine and he's
Consistency.
just riding it, you know?
Yeah. Wait, what's that quote that's like consistency over excitement or something like that? Consistency over. But
That sounds
yeah,
right.
no, that's it's yeah, totally. I totally agree. I totally agree. Well, this was so fun.
This was amazing. I appreciate it so much. I'm so glad we got connected,
Me too.
and yeah, we'll have to stay in touch.
Me too. Let's be friends.
Let's be friends. Let's do it.
Ryan, you're amazing. And you seriously, I mean, I told you the other day, my mom, Sean, me, we're your biggest fans and you've changed our lives. Stoics forever, baby.
I
I
love
get
it.
the I get the email, I get the journal, I get the daily stoic, the daily that's part of my morning routine is reading one page a day.
Oh
The
man,
leather, the black leather one. So thank you for everything. Seriously.
you're the best. That's amazing to hear. And it's it. I think what's interesting for me is, yeah, like I've listened to your songs a bunch of times, and it's just weird to put a face to the work.
Well, likewise, because like Sean told you the other day, we've heard your voice on the audiobook so much, and now your face is moving.
I
It's
love it.
exciting.
All right, talk soon.
Okay, talk soon, Ryan. Bye.